So we have been talking about area and perimeter over the last 3 or 4 weeks in this new unit, and we have learned so far area and perimeter of a square, area and perimeter of a rectangle, area and perimeter of a triangle, area and perimeter of this says trapezium, that just means trapezoid, and area and perimeter of a parallelogram. We haven't learned about a rhombus, and we haven't learned about kite-shaped objects, but we focused on these first 5 so far. So our next topic is going to be finding the area of complex figures. What is a complex figure, you ask? Well, a complex figure is 2 or more regular shapes combined into one. So let's take this shape for example. This is actually a trapezoid, but what we could do is we could draw a little dotted line right down here and actually create 2 separate shapes. It creates a triangle, one shape, and it creates a square on the other. So that's exactly what a complex figure is. Another shape down here, as you can see, we could break that into a parallelogram, which is right here, and we could break it into a trapezoid, which is here. So we have a trapezoid plus a parallelogram combined to create one large complex figure. When I think of complex, I kind of think of like complicated or difficult. These area problems are going to take more than one step. It's going to require you to do at least 2 or 3 steps for each shape. But it's okay because we know our formulas, and you can use this formula sheet to help you. This formula sheet is going to be your best friend. So let's take a look at the different steps to figure out the area of a complex figure. Step number 1 is to find the regular shapes within it. So when you see a shape, your first step is to split it with a little dotted line and break it down into multiple shapes. It could be 2 shapes, it could be 3, it might even be 4 or more shapes. And those are the really complex problems. We're not going to quite tackle those yet. But that's your first step, is just to break them down into different shapes. Step number 2 is where your formulas come into play. So I just copied and pasted this formula sheet here so that you can use it, especially for your example 2. And you can use this as you go through complex figures until you truly understand and memorize the formulas for each shape. So we're going to take a look here. Once we split it into our 2 shapes, we want to identify the area of those 2 shapes. So we're going to start with the triangle. Area of a triangle is the height times the base and then divided by 2. And my area of my rectangle, whoops, sorry, I told you this was a rectangle. This was a square. I mean, it was a rectangle, not a square, sorry. The area of a rectangle is base times height. My second shape is a parallelogram and a trapezoid together. So I need to go over here to my parallelogram, which is base times height. And then the formula for a trapezoid, which I think is the most complicated formula, is base number 1 plus base number 2 times our height divided by 2. So that's our second step, is to identify the area formulas that we're dealing with within our complex figure. Step number 3, I'm going to copy and paste this formula sheet again, just to help us. Whoops, let me make it a little smaller so I can fit it over here. Step number 3 is to figure out measurements and then plug them into the formulas. So let's say we have these 2 shapes like this. I'm going to take my triangle first, and I'm going to solve for the area of this triangle. So my height is 4 centimeters. So I'm going to take 4 times my base. Oh, not that one, because that's the base of the rectangle, right? Base of the triangle divided by 2. So 16 divided by 2 is 8. So my area of the triangle is 8. Now let's solve for the area of a rectangle. Area of a rectangle is base times height. My base is 6. My height, or how tall my rectangle is 4. 6 times 4 is 24. So that's the area of my rectangle. Just the rectangle, not the entire shape. So my next step is going to be add up the areas of the different shapes to figure out the total area. So if I go back here, it's 24 plus 8, which you probably figured it out already. 24 plus 8, and I can do this in my head, but this is for you to visualize. 24 plus 8 is 32. I'm going to take a look if I have any labels here. Centimeters. And then I'm going to make sure I have my squared as well whenever we're talking about area. And that is the area of that complex shape. Another way to call it is just an irregular polygon, or an irregular shape where it's more than one shape. Okay, so that's how you solve the area for a complex figure. So I want you to try one example right now on your own. I'd like you to do it on a blank piece of paper and a pencil. You can use a calculator, and here is the formula sheet for you, and you can look at that as you work as well. Once you're ready to go over your answer, you can resume this video so you can double check your answer. So pause it at this time, take a few minutes to solve this question, and then come back to it. So if you're watching right now, that means you've already solved and figured out the answer. So let's see how you did. So let's see this funky looking shape. We have one shape here, which is a parallelogram. And I have another shape here that's a trapezoid. So let's first plug in my area. Area equals my base times my height, which is 8, equals 40. So the area of that parallelogram, this whole parallelogram, is 40. Area of a trapezoid is, I'm going to take my two bases first, which is 6 and 3. 6 plus 3 is 9. I'm going to multiply 9 by my height, which is 5. 9 times 5 is 45. 45 divided by 2. You can use your calculator if you'd like to solve this, because it's not going to go in evenly. So it's going to be 22.5 is my area of the trapezoid. But remember, that's not my answer, because I need to add both of them together. So you should have added 40 plus 22.5 equals 62.5 centimeters and squared. If you had that entire answer, you are amazing. If you had one or two parts of this process incorrect, you're still amazing. You just need a few more practice problems and you're going to be in the right position. So remember, use your formula sheet if you need to as you practice your complex shapes. Divide them into two separate shapes first, solve for their separate areas, and then add to get your final answer. And don't forget those labels of the length and your little squared symbol. And that's how you solve the area of a complex figure.